Hello once again, and welcome to the newest episode of the 3 on NY3 podcast, focused exclusively on New York's new 3rd District and its race for Congress this November. My name is Andrew Whitman. I'm a political journalist based in Portchester. That's in the Westchester County slice of this new NY3. I'm also presently unemployed. Doing this as a bit of a passion project, some pickup journalism, if you will, where I thought it was needed. This, of course, follows a 14-year stint that I had as the senior political correspondent for FiOS 1 News and RNN Television. We have been interviewing the Democratic candidates for Congress in the new NY3, and in this episode, we continue to do just that as we sit down with Nassau County-based Democratic candidate Reema Rasool. Reema Rasool, Democratic candidate for Congress in the new 3rd District of New York. Thank you so much for joining 3 on NY3.
Thank you, Andrew.
First of all, how's your campaign going? We just passed the petition deadline. Do you have enough signatures to make it onto the ballot? What's your standing in the race? Are you feeling confident in where you are right now?
So yes, I made a very quick trip to Albany last Tuesday morning, was it, or 2 Tuesday mornings ago? We are officially on the ballot. As a matter of fact, something that I always think is very interesting, we always talk about how much money candidates have raised. It's all about the money. The media is calling, how much money do you have? How much money do you have on hand? Between you and me, even when I talked to, Democratic leadership in New York, they insinuated that another one of the candidates had sent their bank statement, and they were like, was it a suggestion? I don't know. But it kind of always comes down to money, right? When we're talking about politics. And we actually, we probably are the least, not probably, I know very well we've raised the least money. We just did our filings last week. But the fact of the matter is, we actually had the most signatures of all candidates in this race. We went to Albany with over 5,400 signatures. We needed 1,500 to get on the ballot. And I mean, as you can imagine, my candidacy, my campaign is very much grassroots. We don't have money to pay people, Andrew. So we're not, I don't have this huge staff. For us, that was the biggest win, I think, so far, just having that, boots on the ground. These are volunteers who just believe in this candidacy. We had volunteers in all, teams in all 5 counties of this humongous congressional district. And we were able to hand in the most. We handed in 5 volumes of signatures to the Board of Elections. And I personally, for me, I'm so proud of that. And I'm so proud of our volunteers and our campaign for being able to get it together and have I think we have the most signatures of any candidate running from Long Island at all. So exciting. We are on the ballot. Yes, to answer your question.
So Reema Rasool, tell us a little bit about yourself and what sparked your passion for and your interest in public service.
I've always just kind of been someone who's very I'm a helper. I'm a networker. I help people. I bring people together. That's just kind of my personality. How I got into really public service, though, when the pandemic really came around, two things I'm going to say that really pushed. Number one, the Trump presidency. As a Muslim American, as a mother of 2 Muslim American kids, I just, all of the overt racism and him just saying everything out loud. I watched my kids who were born into a very beautiful Obama's America. I watched them change. I watched their personalities change during the Trump era. I'll never forget I'm sorry, I called it error, maybe Freudian slip, right? The fact of the matter is that I remember taking my kids when I went to vote in that election, and my younger son was like, "Mommy, there's no way, right?" And I was like, "Of course not." I was completely wrong. And the 4 years that followed, I think, were just very eye-opening for a lot of Americans as to where we stand as a country. And, for me as a Muslim American, I really felt like I needed to stand up and speak out for sure. Because I said to myself, we need to tell our own stories. We need to define ourselves before this government kind of is like defining us. So that was number one, the Trump presidency. Number two, COVID. I am an entrepreneur. I had a business where I was traveling maybe twice a month to Asia, imagine, believe it or not.
What kind of business was it, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. I actually, so I have a company called Lux, and what we do is we take US infrastructure investments, US that are approved by the government. There's a program called EB5, Investor Immigration. And so there are these approved infrastructure projects in the States that are available to foreign investors. And of course, after multiple background checks, and you have to go through everything that you would with immigration, the immigration process. But this investment into this approved kind of fund kind of, puts you in line for a US green card, you and your family. And that's what I did. So as you can imagine, this is extremely popular in Asia, China, India, UAE, like Middle East. And so my company worked with these investments, and we're the ones I would bring principals over. I did client relations, we would do roadshows, I would open offices for them abroad, do all of their marketing, etc. So when COVID hit, I was very much grounded. And I started looking around where I live on Long Island, and I actually live in the same neighborhood I grew up in. And between you and me, it really just started so locally with the roads and water. And I was like, this is, and my 15-year-old who was like, an activist who was like, Mom, our water, our water, our water. And it kind of just got in my head that, oh my God, this kid is really raising an alarm. And I need to listen to him, and that was pretty much it. I in 2021, I was offered by the Democratic Party of Nassau County to run locally for my town board. And that entire experience kind of catapulted me into where we are now. And I learned so much, about how our government is run. And I very much call our campaign a disruptor campaign.
So then what led from that realization over those last couple of years to your decision to run for Congress? Why are you running for Congress, and why do you think you would make a better representative for New York's 3rd district than the other 5 Democrats who are running against you in the primary?
How did that catapult me? Basically, I realized that where I come from, I'm from Long Island. My parents immigrated to this country in the 1970s. I've not been somebody who, was thinking that I would do this. Like there was not like a plan that I was like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get into it. Why I think that I would make a better candidate, I honestly believe, is because I think we need more people in government that come from, the public sector, the private sector, who've done something, who've seen things, who've created jobs, I'm a single mom, I'm raising my kids. I feel like we need more people who are not part of the political class in Congress and in government and at the table making decisions. I really pushed into this race. I pushed in because I said to myself, if I wait my turn, I don't think it's ever going to come. We have this political system, and I believe a political class in this country that I really became very aware of during my local race. And I said to myself, all of these politicians, I have the utmost respect for anybody who gets into this, who gets into politics. It is not easy. It is extremely difficult. You have to really sacrifice a lot. But at the end of the day, what are your intentions and why are you doing it? I am doing this because I am extremely worried about the world that my kids are growing up in and what this country is going to be when they're adults. Like, in my opinion, this is an absolute emergency. Things need to change now. Why do I feel that I'm better? Because I don't owe anyone anything. I don't have any favors. We've taken absolutely no PAC money. We are this campaign, and why I'm running. I think I'm running just for all the right reasons. I'm running because we need Medicare for all. I'm running because we need a Green New Deal in this country. Our climate, this disaster, it's happening now, the emergency, but it just seems like we're okay with it, and I think it's because a lot of these electeds who've been in office for years and years and years, or jumping from one office to another. I get it. I'm a capitalist. Ambition is everything, but why? I feel like there's so much to be done, and career politicians are just not it anymore, because they're in bold. They're kind of attached to things that are not for the people. And I feel like I'm the candidate for the people, because I am the people. I know what everybody's going through. I literally am only doing this because I feel like we need change so badly that it's an emergency. I wouldn't be running if I didn't think it was an emergency.
And with that, we get into the more formal format of the podcast. And again, for people who are new to the podcast, I ask the candidates who come on the show to select 2 topics. We talk about each one for 20 minutes so we can really get into the details. I'll select the topics for the third 20-minute segment. There'll be a little bit of a candidate questionnaire that follows. So I'm going to start my clock for radiate in 20 minutes. We'll find out what the sound on my iPhone for radiate means as we move into the first topic that you've selected, which is healthcare. This seems like an obvious one, but I do want to ask the same questions that I asked at the beginning of all of these. Define the problem, why you've listed it as a top issue for this broadcast, and how you personally have been connected to the issue, or how it found you and registered with such significant importance.
Sure. So healthcare is extremely personal for me. Why? I actually come from a family of doctors. My parents are both physicians. My brother is a physician. My grandfather was a surgeon. Like my aunts and uncles. I really come from from a family of doctors and healthcare providers. And when I talk to them, they are utterly frustrated. I think my parents are both in private practice here in New York. I think that they are some of the last holdouts on community-based practices, where they haven't sold their practices to huge healthcare conglomerates. And the reason is because they really, really feel that, that personal touch, like your family doctor, knowing your patients, we're losing all of that to these huge healthcare companies, and what's better for them, and how they get paid easier, and how it's more how our health and is more streamlined for them to make money on, right? I literally, I was talking to my dad not even 2 weeks ago, and he was so upset. My dad treats cancer patients. And he was so upset that one of his patients needed a bone scan it's not something that was like, oh, maybe we'll do it. This patient needed a bone scan for his or her treatment. And my dad said, literally, he spent about 30 minutes on a call trying to convince some administrator to approve this bone scan for his patient. And he said, finally, I got to the point where I just asked, and I said, do you even know what this bone scan is? And the administrator said, I really don't. Right. And he was like, that was it. He was like, the fact that our healthcare providers are getting approvals from administrators, from people like in corporations, just looking at bottom lines. This is a problem. This is a huge problem. I went through a divorce where it was really difficult. It was a very kind of drawn out, toxic situation. And I had to leave, the home that I lived in with my children. We moved into Manhattan. It was just a crazy time, and the fact of the matter is I could not afford healthcare insurance. I was not, I didn't have enough money, or I didn't have too little money. My kids were uninsured. I was uninsured. This was a matter of years. It was extremely scary. It was the scariest thing ever. And, to have 2 little boys running around, and for me to be literally begging them to be careful, that's, it's not normal. It's not normal. And in this country, in America, in the wealthiest country in the world, there's no morally justifiable reason as to why we cannot have healthcare provided by our government, Medicare for all in its expanded version. I don't think that we don't have a healthcare system right now. When we say system, it's a big joke to me, because there is no system.
I just want to ask, your kids, they emerged from that period of not being insured okay?
Yeah, they were, thank God. Like I really have to say thank God for that time when, they God forbid, they didn't break a bone. They were little kids. You know what I mean? They're two little boys running around. I was very lucky. I was extremely lucky. But Andrew, if I tell you the funniest thing, I, not having insurance, made myself so crazy that I got an ulcer. Imagine, I ended up in the hospital. It's so stressful. Not having insurance makes you sick, right? So basically the fact of the matter is, in this country, we are so reactive. We're reacting to everything. We're reacting to everything. I have so many friends who are in jobs that they hate so that they can have subpar healthcare provided by that job. And I say subpar, they don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to pay their deductibles. God forbid something actually happens, at least they have that little bit of a buffer of their work provided healthcare. I mean, I honestly, when I look at Medicare for All, I'm looking as an entrepreneur and I'm looking as a small business owner. I'm looking at the enormous boost to our economy that would come out of everyone being insured. We think of all these amazing, probably brilliant people stuck in dead-end jobs that they don't like for the health insurance. I mean, I think it would just be a huge boost to support self-employment and small business development.
Well, my next question was going to be, what solution would you propose to try to expand healthcare for all? It sounds as though you are a supporter of Medicare for all. Give me some idea of how that would work, and give me an idea of how your position on healthcare differs from that of your opponents in the upcoming primary.
Sure. Well, I actually am so proud to be running in this race with really amazing candidates. I think that there are 4 of us that are on the same page with Medicare for All, to be honest. So I'm so proud to say that, honestly, because I do think, especially coming out of this pandemic, people's eyes have opened. So many people who were like, oh, maybe not the best. Now everyone's like, yeah, maybe not the best idea to have healthcare attached to employment during a pandemic. maybe not, the best structure for our country. I do believe in Medicare for All. I am one of 4 candidates in this race that do. I do believe that the others will say that we believe in more affordable healthcare. And again, that really bothers me. From my own personal experience, I always say affordable for who? Like who, this is just such a big affordable. That word affordable, for who? For who? Affordable for who? I think that the plan that we have for the expanded Medicare for All, that includes, dental, health, vision, mental health care. I literally, everywhere I go, I want to scream this from the rooftops. Mental health care is not a luxury, should not be a luxury. Unfortunately, with a lot of the plans the way they are now, it is. Mental health care is a luxury. We don't look at mental health the same way we look at, when we talk about our body and healthcare in general. And I honestly believe that we are going to, if we don't change things now, and we don't provide mental health care for American citizens right now, for everybody to say, listen, you need help, take this stigma away. My mom is a psychiatrist. I mean, just from talking to other moms in my school district, these kids, our kids, they're all kind of in this buffer right now. But I think in the next few months, in the next year, we're going to see a lot of problems that are going to come out of the fact that they were isolated for 2 years and on screens for 2 years.
One of the big concerns about Medicare for All is that it will disincentivize through profit some of the participation that we have in our healthcare system. I'm interested, especially because your parents are physicians, but there's a real concern that physicians will make less money under that kind of system, and then they will be less incentivized. So we'll have fewer physicians who are less wedded to it, or less wedded to that as a career. The argument also extends on the pharmaceutical side that if you reduce the profit margin from pharma, that will lead to reduced innovation in addition to other possible delays or wait times. As somebody who is related to people experienced in medicine, how does that approach also include the well-being of the physicians, the pharmaceutical companies, and those that do contribute in positive ways?
Oh, no, absolutely agreed. At this time right now, the way we treat doctors and medical students, we have in this country not invested enough in our university hospitals. We have more medical students coming out than programs to provide medical training for them. every year when we have our match, our residency match, we have an overflow of physicians, and we have not put enough money into training programs. And that's why we have areas in this country where we don't have physicians. We have like gaps in medical care. And I think that's a big, huge part of all of this, is that we really need to look at our infrastructure, even starting at medical school and training, and how these are all government funded programs. When a student finishes medical school, so the next step is they would apply for a residency. And that residency are at university hospitals. That's how they specialize into whatever, surgery. They want to be a anesthesiologist, radiologist, whatever they're going into. It is a shame that we have these amazing students, these people that have worked so hard to go to medical school, come out of medical school. We don't have an infrastructure for them already. So we already have these doctors that have nowhere to go for training. So that's number one. We already have an issue where, on one hand, we need doctors in certain areas in this country. We have gaps in the Midwest where you can go miles without a doctor. And then on the other hand, we have all of these doctors coming out of med school that we have not funded enough continuing education for them. So that's already a huge block. And that's an issue that we have right now. Number two, I don't think that people realize that with managed care, doctors are not, the times of, doctors making huge amounts of money have passed. That doesn't happen anymore. And that really changed with managed care, with the Clinton administration bringing in this kind of group that sits on top of our doctors and tells them what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. So I think we've already made our biggest mistakes to disincentivize our healthcare profession. We've already done that. That's already been done, and they're not happy. They're not happy to begin with. If you look at the American Medical Association, the American Nurses Association of America, all of them are for Medicare for all in its expanded version. In regards to the pharmaceutical companies, I have a major issue. I'm not saying that we as our tax dollars, we are the ones that fund 80% of medical research in this country. So when we talk about these big drugs that are, being invested in, and like these new things coming out, we invest in these. Our tax dollars are the ones that are kind of providing the money for all of this research. And I don't think that would change. Do you know what I mean? I really don't think that would change. I think scientists are not in it for the money. I think that's the corporate pharma that we're kind of looking at, where, they want to make insulin thousands of dollars for people. And that's wrong. We just can't allow that to happen. I don't think that our health, the health of Americans, the health of people that live in this country, should be for profit, should be for, at the highest bidder. I think the fact that we've allowed it this far, we're the only country, a developed country that has allowed this to go on. And I think that's our biggest problem.
Are health insurance companies the enemy here? Is the goal to sort of work them out of the system, if at all?
Yes. I mean, are they the enemy? They're just part of a broken system. And again, when I say the word system, I really say it with tongue in cheek, because there is no ever. It's like, in this country, it's the wild, wild west when it comes to health. You are out there. It's you and your luck of what you're going to get, how you're going to face, God forbid, whatever kind of illness you have and what kind of resources you have. In this country, if you are not extremely wealthy, you don't have a lot of options. You really don't. You don't have options. There are too many people who have gone bankrupt over being sick, and people have lost their homes because they got sick. This is not right. You know what I mean? Like, these are problems that shouldn't be. And we are the only developed country in the world that does this to people, to our own citizens. We're the only ones. Every other, I look at how I always want to say, here by me where I live, there was a US military run center. There still is a mass vaccination site. So that's run by the government, right? We all got our shots and our boosters. We didn't pay. This was all run by the government. I thought the government did a great job.
Should access to healthcare be considered a human right? Is it
100%.
is it something that should be, not that anything gets added to our Constitution easily these days, but would you support adding to the Constitution the right to have access to healthcare?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I truly believe that healthcare is a human right. And the fact that we have made it this big business, this big money business in this country is a big problem. It's a problem.
So then is the goal to try to reduce healthcare costs, which are on some bizarro scale that, you can never figure out what anything's going to cost when you visit a hospital? Or is it just to provide access to insurance and to the system so that people can access this healthcare regardless of what the cost is?
Well, so basically what it is now is it's like we have all these insurance companies and then they kind of go and they bid. Well, this, I'm going to pay this much for this. I'm going to pay this much for that. And that's how it's working right now. If we only had one insurance company, the government, Medicare, so we have, all that bidding, I think all of our pricing kind of gets averaged out and we have one person going in and bidding, one, body going in and like saying, this is what this costs, this is what that costs. I mean, really right now, if you ever looked at an EOB, like if you've gone to a doctor and you kind of look at your explanation, it is insane. It makes no sense. And the fact of the matter is, it just is the luck of the draw of whatever insurance you have. Different insurances, same doctor will charge different insurances for the same procedure at different amounts. It's all about, it's a game, it's a money game. But I think that, when you look at our country and what's happening with obesity and just in general, our health is going down for one of the most, not one of the most, for the richest country in the world. The fact that, our women's health, our reproductive, women's health after giving babies, we are literally going down in the ranks. Why? It's because we're making this a big business and it shouldn't be.
There is a real fear, though, that the quality of healthcare would go down the more government involvement there is in the process. And every time this issue comes up for debate, we hear about long waiting times in Canada or rationing care in Great Britain. Has that been your experience from what you understand of how the rest of the world works? And how do we assuage people's concerns that we can still provide quality healthcare even if we're helping to subsidize or completely cover the cost of it?
Well, the way I see it is that, I know for a fact that when I talk to people every day, I hear that all the time, Andrew. Literally everyone will say to me, but Reema, what about, what about the wait times? And like, what is that going to be like?
Yeah.
I think that unfortunately, not fortunately, it's just the way it is. Messaging and how we say things are so important, right? And unfortunately, with us Democrats, we are really bad at this. We're really bad at messaging. And I think, there's no doubt in my mind that the good outweighs whatever bad there might be exponentially by leaps and bounds. And am I saying that this would be perfect and there'll be no kinks? No, because think about it. I always think about, the healthcare worker, like people who do medical billing, people who work at health insurance companies, like, all that entire sector who would lose their jobs. And I always think about them. But I do believe that if we do it right, we can take care of everybody. We just have to keep everything in mind and do it the right way. And the messaging, the way we explain it to people.
Well, to that end, Reema, I've been hearing about this, 15, 20, a long time, where you will say to somebody, okay, let's say you spend $20,000 a year on health insurance. Most people don't realize that they do because so much of that comes out of your paycheck and you never see it coming out of your own bank account. But even if you say to them, okay, you're spending right now $20,000 a year on health insurance. If we reduce that to zero, but you pay an extra $10,000 a year in taxes, you still save $10,000 over the long run. But most people say, no, I don't want to see my taxes go up 10%. There seems to be a logical disconnect in that math problem. How do you break through? It's a messaging problem, but how do you break through when so few people seem to have been able to successfully break through with that messaging in the past?
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I talk to voters, I don't really say Medicare for all. I don't use those words. I talk about, how we would be able to, boost wages and salaries because employers would be able to redirect money that they're spending on healthcare costs to their workers, right? I talk about increasing job qualities because now every job comes bundled with a guarantee of healthcare because everybody has healthcare, right? With the boost to job quality, even greater among women workers who are less likely to have employee sponsored healthcare. I talked a lot, for women, this is huge because, I talk about how you lessen the stress an economic shock of losing a job or moving between jobs. Like these are things that we all are constantly thinking about. But what about my healthcare? What about my healthcare? I talk about how we would be able to sustain, like lessen the stresses and sustain support self-employment, which is the American dream. I talk about all of these things, and then as you said, people don't realize because it comes out of their check how much. Is that the 20 minutes?
No, keep going. Finish your thought, please.
People don't realize exactly what you said, that how much money they are spending. If you really look at that paycheck and how much money is coming out and the quality of the healthcare you're getting for that money. And say, yes, you're paying a little bit more in taxes, but think about all the money you're saving when you're, at the pharmacy also. So I like to talk about the actual aspects and the actual like changes that will come about. And I'm not saying the name. I do the same thing with the Green New Deal between you and me. And I think, unfortunately, our PR machine is so bad that just when you say Green New Deal, you say Medicare for all, it's like negative. One thing the Republicans know how to do is message.
That is true. As you heard, we hit the timer for the end of that first 20-minute segment. So I am now going to adjust the timer to 20 minutes for playtime. We'll find out what playtime sounds like in 20 minutes. The second topic that you pitched to focus on in this broadcast is climate. This seems self-obvious, but define the problem, why it's another top issue for you in this race, and again, personally, how you found the issue or how it found you.
Yeah, absolutely. As a mom, I think about my children's future. I think when I'm not thinking all the time, I think it's always in the back of my head. My kids are now teenagers. I have a 15-year-old and an almost 13-year-old. And I see them, turning into adults. Like, you see it, I'm watching them, and I am so scared for them. I'm so scared for what their kids are going to be dealing with when I look outside, even my window, and what we're doing to this planet. Last summer, we don't have to go that far. It was all the fires that are happening, the drought. It's a horror movie, and it's unraveling in front of our eyes. It's happening right now, but it's not happy, and the media doesn't want to cover it, and it's scary. So people don't want to think about it. As I told you earlier, it really started with me with our drinking water. Here on Long Island, we have the most disgusting, toxic drinking water, tap water here. And I used to talk about it in my town campaign. And I used to say, in New York, on Long Island, we literally are on the top of every high tax list, the highest taxes: Nassau County, Suffolk County, Westchester County, highest taxes in the country. We cannot drink water out of our taps. It's a problem. It's a big problem, especially for here on Long Island. We have outdated septic tanks that are buried underground, that are seeping into the sound, that are seeping into our drinking water, that are seeping into all of our pipes. It's disgusting. It's really a disgusting problem. No one is talking. No one wants to talk. Is it fun to talk about? No, it's gross. It's really gross. Like, no one wants to think about it. Everyone wants to go buy another Brita. I feel like enough. We really need to discuss what's happening and change things. I personally, sometimes I talk to my kids and their friends. I feel like they've said to me, do you guys just not care about us? Do you guys just not care about what it's going to be like for us and our kids? Like, because you guys will be gone. It's kind of morbid. You know how kids are. They'll say things like that. but it's true the way we're acting. Absolutely. We're acting like we could care less because we're not going to be here when it really hits the fan.
So what would your proposal be to try to address the climate crisis, both in terms of immediate impacts, like to stop the flooding that we've seen so far, but then also over the long term? And how does your solution differ from those of your opponents in the primary?
Well, I am 100% in for Green New Deal. I feel like we need to realize a Green New Deal.
I'm sorry, can you define for us what the Green New Deal is and what it isn't? Because there's a lot of confusion about it.
Well, you know what? The thing about the Green New Deal is it's like a proposal, right? It's a proposal. The funny thing that I always, and again, with the messaging, the other day I was sitting with someone when our gas prices were like through the roof, as they have been. And someone said the funniest thing to me. And she said, Reema, go on Twitter and put in Green New Deal. Just search it. And I put in Green New Deal, and basically it was being blamed for all the high gas prices, as if anything has even been, so far, nothing has even been, it's a pledge, pretty much. All of our candidates in the 2020 election did agree to this pledge. And basically there's 7 aspects. Shift to 100% of national power generation to renewable sources. Right.
People. I'm sure people can look up what isn't the Green New Deal.
What isn't the Green New Deal? Well, we're not going to take away the hamburgers and cheeseburgers like everybody's saying, right? What isn't the Green New Deal? I don't even know what people say, but people just have these silly. No one is going to come in and, take your trucks away. No one is going to come in and say everyone has to drive a Prius or a bicycle. This is not the point. We're not trying to change everyone's life in a way that you're like, oh my gosh, no, you're not going to take my steaks away. And you're not. These are all the ridiculous talking points. What really will come from a Green New Deal is to just build a national energy efficient smart grid, where we are trying to stay away, from all of this gas and importing and all of these, fossil fuels. We need to kind of detach a little bit and look at the future and look at how we can do things in a cleaner way. I personally think, especially here for this district, as they now made it a shoreline district, I look at it as an amazing economy boost of what kind of jobs can be created while pushing these new initiatives. Like, for example, we really, on our shores, we need to the walls of all of our water. We need to, I'm so sorry.
Like sea walls is what you're talking about.
Sea walls. I'm fasting. It's Ramadan. And I get these I haven't had coffee since 5 a.m. So this is I gotta get a lot of these mental things.
Understood.
My kids know exactly after we break fast, I get all my blood rushes to my stomach. And that's when they ask me for things. They know that I'm not really thinking. Read the seawalls. We need to do the support again. And these are very high paying jobs. These basically, especially for us now in New York 3, now that they've made us this shoreline district, I think it's a really unique opportunity for whoever is representing to really, really, bring money from the federal government to protect our most vulnerable neighborhoods on the water, to create amazing high-paying jobs that will reinforce our seawalls, as well as looking into wind, solar, not to mention water energy. And the person that represents New York 3 now, yes, in a way, everyone is laughing that you need a boat to get around. And I heard someone saying, oh, you'll need a scuba suit to go over to Westchester or the Bronx, from Long Island. But the fact of the matter is, they really did create an amazing opportunity for someone to really, dig their heels in and demand federal money to clean up the Long Island Sound, to do. There's just so much that we can do.
Earlier you went through some of the more irrational arguments against climate change or against the Green New Deal. I want to focus on the rational concerns that I've heard about it. And most of those focus on cost, that to become compliant, businesses and industries will face additional costs that will likely be passed on to the consumer. Individual consumers will face higher costs that they will then have to pay out of pocket. And even if the federal government subsidizes some or all of this, well, that's public money that comes out of individuals' pockets. So how do you address the concern that the Green New Deal and other climate remedies cost so much money that will actually hamper the economy and maybe even do more damage than good?
Again, I see, like, for me, I can't imagine that, paying a little bit more to save our planet would really, like, that just wouldn't bother me personally when I look at the negatives. But then again, it's always the talking point that we don't have money from our federal government for things for our citizens. We don't have money for Medicare for all. We don't have money for the Green New Deal. But when it comes to like billions of dollars to buy new airplanes and bombs, oh my God, the money's there. The billions of dollars are right here. Here they are. Let's go put it in.
Would you be looking to shrink defense spending and then use some of that
100%.
money? Okay.
100%.
Back to climate change. I was just curious about that.
Yeah. But yeah, I truly, again, of course, messaging. When you look at the fact that our, planet is literally burning, we're not gonna have water to drink. We're not gonna, you know what I mean? Like, and then we talk about, oh, it'll be a little bit more expensive on the consumer. I think that once people really understand the extremity of the actual crisis that we're in, all of this is going to go to the side that, oh, I have to pay a couple of dollars more here and there. But our grandchildren are going to be living on a planet that's habitable, right? Like, I just think, we're comparing things that are ridiculous here. Like, when we're talking about, and I know it's a funny thing where we say, oh, we're taking away your cheeseburgers and all that stuff. I know that, it's more of a joke, but, a little bit of sacrifice. I mean, think about, for me, there's just absolutely no negative. There's no negative in changing towards, and we're not saying all of this is going to happen now, right? These goals are by 2040, 2050, 2100. That's kind of like how the plan is made. Surprisingly, the Green New Deal does not include a carbon tax or a cap on any trade program, or the programs may raise the cost on carbon fuels like gasoline, but I mean, look at us now anyway. Look at how high, look at gas prices as they are. So I don't think that we can really even compare saving our planet and like saving humanity to a little bit more money in taxes.
The other rational argument that I hear against climate change is that, well, this is a global issue.
Yes.
Which means that the entire world needs to participate.
Yes.
But some of our trading partners, including China and India, may not be following along, may continue to pollute. And so what's the point of us doing anything if they won't, when it would just put us in a competitive disadvantage? What's your response to those criticisms?
I know, I truly understand that. And I think that's where, the Paris Agreement came in. And the fact of the matter is that when we are legitimately on a path to doing things in a better way, I think that's when we can kind of stand up and tell others, that, listen, let's all get on board. These are all hypotheticals. Oh, well, why should we do it if they're not going to do it? It's almost like, like high school. Like, well, I'm not going to do it if you're not going to do it. Well, okay, well, I'm going to do it then. I think we're like the homecoming queen, right? So I think once we start moving towards, realizing the Green New Deal, when we start moving towards, setting these carbon-free goals, look at California, look at Hawaii. I think that there's no leg to stand on right now. We can't tell, we're not doing anything differently. How are we going to tell others? But I think once we are committed and actually moving towards becoming carbon free and less reliant on fossil fuels, I think that's when we can ask other countries to do the same, not when it's just all hypothetical. Well, if you're not going to do it, then why should I even do it? It doesn't make sense.
You've mentioned a couple of times, both on this and on healthcare, the messaging,
Yes.
and that Democrats aren't good at messaging, and Republicans seem to have a stronger position when it comes to that messaging. Climate change also falls victim to that. The Green New Deal, there are people in this country who just immediately associate those words with socialism or communism.
Yeah.
But so how do we get around that messaging gap? What's the secret formula that Reema Rasool knows about how to better message this that other Democrats haven't been able to figure out?
Well, you know what? As I said earlier, Andrew, when I talk to voters in the district, because they have the exact same that's the affiliation in their brain. When I say Medicare for all, they're like, wait, no. When I say Green New Deal, same thing. No, you're going to take away my rights. You're taking stuff away from me. I tend to not use the labels. I talk about what it actually is, because the label, the first thing I do when you say the name, people are automatically turned off, which is such a shame. And I mean, if it was up to me, these, obviously it was not, these would have been rolled out in a very different way. The messaging for Medicare for all, the messaging for the Green New Deal. It's everything, Andrew, in politics is how you talk to people and how you connect with people, and if they trust you, right? Unfortunately, we have a trust issue with our party where people don't know where our affiliations lie. I hear this communism and socialism thing all the time. It blows my mind that people have been able to label us communists by just saying we feel like everyone deserves health care. Or you can be labeled a communist for just saying, you know what, we need to be less reliant on fossil fuels and move away from buying oil from all over the world. And look at the mess we're in now. So I think that unfortunately we have to start all over again. In my campaign, this was a new beginning. When I'm talking to voters, I don't have a lot of the baggage that a lot of the other candidates do. And I sit down with people all the time and I just explain things, and I explain things the way I would my kids. And I explain things the way I'd like someone to explain things to me, because, sometimes I do feel like we as Democrats can be a little condescending. I really do believe that. And that's what people feel as well, that what you think you know better for me. You're not, you're over my head and you know better for me. No, we all have to be in this together. Everyone has to be on board.
Bit of a practical question for you, because you obviously have an agenda when it comes to climate change. You support the Green New Deal, but odds are, barring something miraculous that nobody sees coming, you're going to walk into a political environment, if you're elected to Congress, where best case scenario, the numbers are about where they are now in the House and Senate. Worst case scenario is you're in the minority in the House and maybe the minority in the Senate as well, which would block really any attempt to try to make any headway on climate. So in addition, if that were the case, in addition to just trying to play defense and stopping Republicans from degrading the climate even further with their policies, what more would you be able to do if elected to a minority position? Would that just be sounding the alarm and talking and trying to spread the word as much as you can? What more would you be able to do if put in that position?
I think so. And honestly, I'm the kind of person that I try to get along with everybody. I live on Long Island. I went to Catholic school. A lot of the kids that I went to Catholic school with are Republicans. A lot of the people that I grew up with are Republicans. I don't think that we need to be so divisive. I honestly, like, it's become like me against you with our neighbors. It's become really scary and sad. We have way more in common than we have not in common, I think, as Americans. I think when we start talking about sports and when we start talking about movies and music, I think we have a lot in common. When I talk to people, I think the grounding, like the thing that kind of brings us together are kids. Our kids that, and I say to them, listen, if I'm talking to a grandma or a grandpa or a mom or a dad, when I talk about the aspects of the Green New Deal, and when I talk about our kids and the environment they're going to be living in, I think people understand. And again, I think, as you said, if Democrats are in the minority, I don't think we hear it enough. I don't think the alarm, I honestly see, I don't think that we are being urgent enough. We're not kind of pushing through this urgency that it's here. The climate crisis is here. We don't like to talk about it because it's scary, and we don't like to talk about it because it's not happy, and you're not going to raise money by going out and telling people that the world is burning. And unfortunately, that's all politics is. You want to go out, you have to raise money. You have to raise money. You want a stage, you have to have money, right? And I honestly believe that the way our political system is built is awful. I think the way we elect candidates is awful. And I think that that is a huge reason as to why we don't address real problems, is because every politician is looking for their next donor. And maybe their donor doesn't want to hear about gloom and doom. But I think we just have to be real. I personally believe in term limits for politicians. I believe that we really need to disrupt the political class in this country. The political class in this country is not letting anything get pushed through because they're very comfortable in their seats. They're very comfortable in positions of power. And, unfortunately, things aren't going to change unless we, the people, actually get in and change them.
You've hit on a number of different individual topics under the umbrella of climate. I think we've got about a minute left in this part of the conversation. So let's say you can't get everything you want if elected. Right. Let me pick one or two specific climate-related, very narrow focused issues. What would be the one or two specific climate issues that you would prioritize and say, well, if I could only get these two, it's going to be these two?
I think we need to fund massive investments in the drawdown of greenhouse gases. That's huge. We need federal money for that. That's something where we have to figure it out. And that's one thing. I think, we don't talk about greenhouse gases enough. And number two, I mentioned it earlier, building a smart grid for this country, a national smart grid where we are just becoming more energy efficient. Yeah.
We hit the timer. I don't know if you were able to hear what playtime sounded like, but so that is the end of topic number 2. I'm going to set the clock for Hillside, and we'll find out what that sounds like in 20 minutes, because now we're to the final 20-minute segment, which are going to be the topics that I propose that you have not been advised of before we get started. And the first one I want to touch on is something that you said at the very beginning of the candidate forum that I hosted last month, and you've mentioned it a few times in the conversation so far today as a driver that led you into politics. You talked about your divorce. Mm-hmm. I am also a fellow survivor of that same war, though I was fortunate enough not to have any kids get involved in the process, which would have just made it much more difficult. I went through a lot of things through my divorce, some depression, some outlook questions, some questions about what I want to do with the rest of my life. The one thing that never came to me was, I think this makes me want to run for Congress. So if you explain to me how that has advised you in this decision and how it led you in part to run for Congress.
Well, okay, that's so funny. I honestly, same. I really question my existence and question my decisions and question my own intelligence. Divorce is something that we don't talk about enough in this country. I really mean that. And it's so funny that you brought this up, because I talk about this on the campaign trail all the time. People want to talk about divorce all the time because they're going through it. They've been through it. They get it, right? I do think divorce makes you a stronger person. But for me, I had to overcome a lot. I was not a breadwinner in my household. Becoming a single mom, I think, made me become kind of like a superhuman, because you're just trying to do a million things. And then you have these 2 little kids. I had these 2 little kids looking up at me, And we were like a team. We were like doing it together, for me, in the beginning of my divorce, as someone who could not financially provide for my kids or myself, and making decisions and kind of proving to myself that, wait a second, Reema, you're kind of a fighter. You're not going to lay down and just let things happen to you. My ex is an attorney. He made my divorce extremely difficult and long drawn. I had to change lawyers like 3 times. As I said, we had major issues. We couldn't afford health insurance, but I pivoted in my work. I actually worked in fashion. And I always say I went from fashion to finance. I was almost doing the same thing, but not a lot of money in fashion. There's a lot of money in finance, right? So I kind of pivoted. And the way I was able to pull myself out of the hole that I was in when I left my ex, I actually was in a very abusive marriage. And I'll be honest with you, how I left is kind of crazy. My older son at the time was about 4 or 5. And he asked my mother one day, well, I wasn't even there. He calls my mom, Nani, why does my dad kick my mom? Right. And my mother lost. I was very quiet about it. I'm South Asian, we're Muslim. I had made that decision. It was an arranged marriage, but I had agreed. I had made that decision. I was very young. And it was really scary. It was a bad time in my life. But for how I came out of it, how I was able to start my new company, make money, figure things out, provide for my children, provide for myself. I started a nonprofit about 12 years ago for women in business called Say We, where we provide continuing business education and mentorship for women who are interested in entrepreneurship. And I was able to go to Wells Fargo, go to, Mass Mutual, Pepsi, and say, listen, you guys need to provide resources. You guys need to do this for women because you have enough. It's a corporate responsibility. And they did. And they invested hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in, developing women who were interested in business, entrepreneurship, continuing business education for free. And, out of that, imagine, came another nonprofit. Another group who was part of my nonprofit started another nonprofit for immigrant women in New York. It just, kind of fell from, grew from one thing to another. But I realized that I was a fighter through that whole process. And I realized that I was someone who was not only going to fight for myself and my kids, but someone who was going to fight for people around me, my family, like friends, and just provide that kind of strength and stability for others. How that parlayed into running for Congress, I do think that it had a lot to do with it, because I realized that I had it in me to do this. And I do think that, and I talk about my kids so much, but a lot of what I'm doing is for them, because I need them to see strong women, that their mother is a strong woman, especially because of our background and how they grew up and what they might have seen when we were struggling. But for sure, it did catapult me because it made me stronger, and it made me realize that I could do anything. I wasn't going to lie down and take any nonsense from attorneys, from anybody. I got up and I fell down a million times, but I got up 1,000,001 times. And I think that's what kind of catapulted me into thinking that I could do this as well.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a thank you. Yeah. The main topic that I want to focus on in this segment is the middle class, and even the upper middle class, because let's be honest, life in the 3rd district, given the communities that we represent, you have to be in the middle class to afford to live in New York 3. And really, you almost have to be in the upper middle class to afford it. It's an expensive place to live. And yet, just a quick review of headlines that I found recently while researching the middle class is shrinking in size and has been for the last several decades. The middle class is earning less of the total income pie. More of that's going to the top end, than in years past. In one search for middle class trends 2022, I found two headlines within two articles of each other. Millions lost step into the middle class, which means it's harder to get into the middle class. And for most Americans, owning a home is now a distant dream. Mm-hmm. And this fact, too, from CNBC and Lending Club, 64% of all Americans now say that they are living paycheck to paycheck. That's untenable and incredibly undermining for people who want to live in this district, or the people who are in this district and have been here for years, who are finding difficulty hanging on to the lifestyle that really they associate with the American dream in many cases. How do we make things better for the middle class? And particularly when that slice of the middle class in New York 3 is really the upper middle class or the lower upper class, just to afford the homes here and the property taxes here. It is not easy being in the middle class or living in NY3 these days.
Oh, absolutely not, especially coming out of COVID. I mean, it has been insane. When I'm out talking to people, we call the middle class the missing class, because it's disappearing. The middle class is disappearing. In New York 3, I think the average income is somewhere around $160,000 is like the average household. And I talk to people every day who are retired and cannot afford to stay in their homes anymore because our property taxes are through the roof. I personally feel that we in New York do not get enough from our federal government. We do not get enough back. Right now, we get back 90 cents on every dollar that we give in. If only we could match dollar to dollar, we would have an extra $26 billion in our budget. I'm bringing this all back to what we discussed earlier as well. I think a huge boost would be Medicare for all, huge boost to the middle class. And one other thing that, I talk about a lot, and that is fixing the tax code, the small business tax code. And here in Long Island, Westchester County, the Bronx, Queens, small businesses. The heart of our economy are small business owners and small businesses. I'm talking about, the pizza shop on the corner. I'm talking about the lawyer's office. I'm talking about the doctor's office. These are all small businesses. One major problem that I have with the way our tax code is run is how they define a small business. So right now, the definition of a small business, according to our tax code, is any business between 1 and 500 employees, all paying the same tax category. That's crazy to me. And I think that's why we're having our middle class is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, because when I'm thinking about a small business, I'm thinking about a business that employs less than, 12 or less employees. That's a small business, right? The fact that in this country, the things that we do, the taxes, the layers of taxes that we enforce on anybody that's looking to hire people is insane. It's insane. We have a system where we pit small business owners against workers. And it's like, oh, is this small business going to thrive, or is the worker going to survive? And it's absolutely awful. You want to put a payroll in force? You want to hire 4 people? Okay, great. You make enough money, for your company, your business, you want to hire them. You have unemployment tax. The first thing you have is a payroll tax on your payroll tax. Then you have an unemployment tax. Then your employees are paying taxes on that same money that you're paying them. They're getting their taxes pulled out. It's insane what we do to small business owners. I say and this is a huge fix, I think, for what we see, the shrinking middle class and this whole paycheck to paycheck, because we need to redefine what a small business is in this country and repeal some of these ridiculous taxes that we put on small business owners. Small business should be any business with 12 or less employees. That is a true small business. It is insane to me that a person that employs 2 people is paying the same amount of taxes that a person that employs 400 people. It's not the same level. It's not the same thing. A small business does not have 400 or 500 employees. That's not a small business. I think that we need to redefine our tax code for small businesses. And I think it would be the #1 boost to our local economies, to the heartbeat. These are who employs, who is employing us, who are employing our neighbors. It's the small businesses in our towns, especially coming out of COVID. All these billions of dollars in subsidies that we can give to, I call them, the oligarchs of this country, the healthcare oligarchs, the oil and gas oligarchs, billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, the way that we are okay with that, but we're not okay with helping small businesses, I think we need to repeal the payroll tax, repeal the unemployment tax for my newly defined small business, 12 employees and under. And I think that would make a huge difference to our local economy. Huge, huge difference.
I mean, how you do that and how you come up with the definitions is really that. They say the devil's in the details. That's really
Absolutely.
it. Everybody has heard about the Koch brothers
Right.
and Koch Industries.
Right.
Koch Industries is technically a small business because they've
Right.
framed the business so that it was just like the two of them or four of them,
Right.
and then everything else was a subsidiary business. Is it even possible to define a small business in a way that sets that up for the fairness that you're advocating for?
I do believe that, of course, there's always technicalities. There are always going to be people who try to take, I was speaking somewhere the other night and I was talking about this small business, fair taxes for small businesses. And someone said to me, oh, but like, can't you just like create an LC and then like you just pay like, it's like income tax? Right. And I was like, no, I get what you're saying, but I'm not talking about income tax. I'm talking about the taxes that are involved in employment, specifically in employment. And I do think that there are certain facets that we, physical location. When I'm talking about, small businesses, of course, what you're talking about with the Koch brothers, these are consulting firms. Right. And I think that there has to be a different category for a consulting firm and an actual brick and mortar mom and pop shop. I do know that we're always going to have people who are going to be able to get around certain taxes. Look at these huge corporations. I was reading the other day that if you paid, $1 in taxes this year, you paid more than XYZ, these humongous companies that don't pay tax. I mean, we always will have loopholes. I do think so, but I think the effect of positivity this would have on the mom and pops, on the brick and mortar, it's insane how much money that they would be able to actually keep in their pockets.
For generations now, one of the keys for elevating the middle class into the middle class or making the working class the middle class has been real estate and home ownership. It's for most Americans, it's the single largest investment that they make. And the rising value of real estate has helped them increase their own personal wealth. That's great for people who own houses now, but that also puts them, as prices have gone up, significantly out of reach for a growing number of people who are the kids of the middle class or are looking for middle class to establish their own roots in the middle class. How do you balance those two interests? Because you could make home ownership more accessible and more affordable, but you'd be hurting people with their prime investment who are in their homes now. But if you don't address it, you run the risk that your kids or my kids, if I'm lucky enough to have any, might not be able to afford their way into that staple of the middle class.
Absolutely. I truly feel, Andrew, that we have one of the biggest intersecting problem that we have in New York. The biggest problem is affordable housing. Everybody that I talked to, it always comes back to affordable housing. We have a housing emergency in New York.
And I'll just, most affordable housing, when that conversation comes up, is in relation to rentals, to be able to rent an affordable piece of property. But we're also talking about this in terms of ownership, which is a key to middle class existence. I apologize for interrupting.
No, absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I can speak of super hyper locally for myself here on Long Island in Nassau County. We are actually opening our campaign offices in Hicksville in a few weeks. Hicksville train station at the Long Island Railroad. This is the biggest commuter hub on Long Island, the biggest. The most people going in and out of, to Penn Station and back from Hicksville. We here have a huge housing problem. We have a huge housing problem. I know that we have a few new rental buildings coming up adjacent to the train station. So, they're definitely looking at putting more affordable housing near commuter rails, less, which is all makes sense and all beautiful. However, I feel like we really need to look into affordable condos, affordable co-ops. We are only looking at rentals. We are only looking at least here where I live, everything new that's coming up are all rentals. None of it is for ownership, right? Where I live right now, the house that I live in, I would never be able to buy. My parents bought this house in the early 80s, and they moved here from Glen Cove. We lived in Glen Cove. They moved here to Jericho School District, and the fact of the matter is that I would never be able to afford to buy this home. I am lucky enough that my parents purchased it in the in the 80s, and now I live here with my family and I can maintain this household. But if I were to go out in the market, I would never be able to buy this house, the house that I live in. And that's a problem. That's a problem. There is nowhere even around me in this school district where I could probably afford to buy a home.
So how do we fix that problem?
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying that all of the new stuff that's coming up are all, as I said, all rentals. We need more planning for home ownership that's affordable. We need more federal money. Literally, I truly believe we need more federal money coming in to help us kind of find places where we can build condos and co-ops. I know that for Manhattan right now, they're looking at commercial space and trying to convert a lot of commercial space into affordable housing. But the number one intersecting problem in New York, with no doubt in my mind, is housing. The governor actually initially had a plan where they were going to ease up, especially Westchester, Long Island. We have really rigid, structures put in our towns where we can't maybe like rent out the garage or build a new, be a two-family, be a mother-daughter, legally. It's happening illegally all over the place, but legally. And imagine Long Island, the electeds railed against it to the point where she took it out of her plan for New York. The ADP, I don't know if you heard about this, it was really big here on Long Island. We need to change things. Like, we have to really start talking. We don't have enough young people moving in. We have less and less young people, less and less people in our schools, because no one can afford to live here anymore. And I honestly believe that we need to invest in a government plan. The government, like federal government, has to come in. We need planning. We need planning, and it's not going to happen with the electeds who are just taking money from real estate developers. I'll tell you, it's not going to happen that way, because that's the problem here.
And with that, we hit the 20-minute mark and bring to an end this third part of the conversation. I want to go now to our candidate questionnaire. These are 13 different questions that I am asking every candidate who appears on the show to answer. Some are designed to get your position on some things. Some are just designed to get a sense of who you are and how you process things. They're designed to go from more serious topics down to less serious topics, and should be quicker with the questions and the answers, except for this first one, which you can feel free to take your time on. The winner of this race in New York's 3rd district, if trends allow and the courts permit the district lines to stay the same, probably in the driver's seat to hold the seat for the next decade, if they were so inclined. So given that, what steps will you take, even above and beyond what's required by law or by ethics, to ensure to voters that you are not profiting from your position in Congress if you are elected?
Well, for sure, number one, the fact that we have, electeds who think that it's okay for them to trade stock is so crazy to me. The fact that this is a discussion is so crazy to me. Number one, I would absolutely, first of all, I don't trade stock anyway. So it's not like I'd be changing my lifestyle I would stick to not trading, not being in the stock market. I would stick to that position as I do now.
That should make it easier.
That would make it easier. My company that I own, I would absolutely detach myself. I mean, for me, it's not like I'm very entangled financially. It wouldn't be a very difficult thing.
And you'd be willing to make all of that public, or at least disclose it so that people know that you're not?
100% disclosure. I mean, the fact that we have to beg right now, I was watching this morning the news, and the mayor is thinking about disclosing his taxes. That's crazy to me. You're the mayor. Of course you have to disclose. And of course, any elected official should have to disclose, absolutely, and not be able to make any profit on decisions that they're making and power that they hold.
Especially considering we just went through 4 years of that with the president of the United States.
It should be a no-brainer.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 2. If given your choice, what congressional committees would you want to sit on in the House, and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. I have never really thought about that. Which committees would
That's a perfectly fine answer. You don't have to, if you haven't thought about it, I don't want to, some of this is to put you on the spot, but if you haven't thought about it, then that's fine.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it, but I certainly would love to be on a committee that had to do with, obviously healthcare. Healthcare is my number one thing. And I would love to be on the committee that deals with taxes and healthcare, for sure.
Fair enough. I think that would either be, I think you're looking at Ways and Means, you're looking at appropriations, and a few others. All right, question number 3. Assuming that the mainstream reporting is accurate, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, should Donald Trump face criminal prosecution?
Yes, 100% he should.
Should Clarence Thomas be impeached?
Yes, he should be. Without a doubt, he should be impeached.
Even if doing either or both all but guarantees that Republicans will look to prosecute Joe Biden or anybody else who's elected president, or would look to similarly impeach other Supreme Court justices, regardless of evidence, just because of the tit for tat nature of our politics.
Well, that's just the sad thing that's happening right now in our government, isn't it? That's just so sad that we are going to let a criminal go because of the repercussion on the other side. I don't think Joe Biden has done any kind of, trying to overrun the government. I don't think he's done anything like planning January 6th. With Clarence Thomas, with his wife, Ginny Thomas, literally being part of this whole, the big lie. What do they call it? It's insane that he is sitting on our Supreme Court and making decisions about it. So I think that we have to just do what's right. I'm a very firm believer in do what's right. Unfortunately, right now, our country is so divided. I can't imagine in my youth the Republican Party becoming what it is now. I mean, my parents are Republicans. I mean, the Republicans it used to be something different. Now it's almost like, this tit for tat that you're talking about, there's no morals. It's just like, well, if you did it, we're going to do it. But, the right is still right. I think about, Lieutenant Vindman, and what did he say says in this country, right stands for something. Doing the right thing stands for something. And I'm very much with him in that you have to do what's right.
Question number 4, is there ever a circumstance where it would be appropriate for a member of Congress to lie to their constituents?
No, absolutely not.
What about not tell the whole truth?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
And I have to say that I truly believe that. So a lot of people, maybe, right now our representative is Tom Suozzi. And, people might feel however they feel about him. He's running for governor, but I saw him in this district. I would see him. I would meet him. I would get to talk to him. I respect that about him a lot. He was not sitting in DC. You went to this event, you went to that event. Tom Suozzi was there and you could talk to him. He's very approachable. He's a family guy. I respect the heck out of that, especially with him. And our Congress people should be around us. It shouldn't be, that there's, sitting in these offices and we can't get to them. So yes, I think that you really, you work for the people. A lot of times things aren't happy. Things aren't great. As someone who's run a business, a lot of times I had to tell employees, tell people that work for me that things weren't great, but that's just what a leader has to do. That, it is what it is. They're not going to like you for that time. And maybe it's your fault, or maybe you messed up. You have to own up to it, for sure.
Question number 5, state a public policy position or a decision that you've made in the past that you now regret or have changed your view on over the years.
Have I changed my view on anything? Very kind of grounded in my views.
If you can't think of something, that's a perfectly fine answer. I'm just curious.
I'll be honest with you. I can't think of anything that I have changed my view on at all. I'm pretty, I've always been.
That's fine. That leads me right into question number 6, which is name a position that you hold that you think might be out of step with the majority of your party, if there is a position.
Term limits. I don't think that a lot of people believe in term limits. I will scream it from every rooftop. I've had so many amazing discussions with constituents about term limits where they're like, oh, well, that's just not the right thing. And I love those conversations because I learned so much. But absolutely term limits. I think that if our president can only be in for 2 terms, 8 years, I don't think and I believe this from top to bottom, even in town positions. We need term limits in this country.
If you're elected to Congress, you'll face re-election in 2024, which is a presidential election year. Mm-hmm. Should Joe Biden be the Democratic nominee for president in 2024, or do you think he should step aside for a new generation of Democratic leaders?
Well, that's really, really a good question. I think as of now, he's okay. I think I think he's okay. I don't see any, he looks healthy, he looks good. But I do think that, when the time comes, he does have to make a decision. And I don't think it would be awful for him to say, you know what, I did it. I'm the oldest president ever, maybe it's time for me to. I don't think that would be a bad thing, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Right now, I don't think it's necessary.
Question number 8. What's the best Republican idea you've heard lately?
Ooh, what is the best Republican idea I've heard lately? I wish I could say something. Lately, the only things I've been hearing are just batshit. So I mean, I really can't. You know what I mean? I can't think of anything. I've literally what's been coming. This news, the grooming, the CRT. They'll ban the books. I haven't heard any good ideas lately. I've heard nonsense and the don't say gay. It's blowing my mind that these things are happening in America.
That is sadly in 2022 an acceptable answer to that question. Question number 9. Could you ever support Andrew Cuomo in the future?
No.
How about Al Franken?
Yes.
You see a difference between the two?
I kind of do, only because Andrew Cuomo had, there were 6 women came forward and had
that
stories.
Sounds about right.
He resigned. There was a reason. If he felt like there was no reason for him to resign, he shouldn't have resigned, right? However, with Al Franken, where I see the difference is that it was I think only an image. I don't know if that woman actually came out to complain. So I would need a little bit more detail, but from what I do know, I think that, and Al Franken was a comedian. I don't know if he was doing a bit. I know he was on stage when that picture happened. But I do think that Al Franken got a bad deal. I don't think that Andrew Cuomo got a bad deal.
Fair enough. Question number 10. Have you ever imagined yourself in higher office, had a dream where you woke up and you were the president of the United States or the Supreme Court justice or, an ambassador or something like that?
No, but the fact of the matter is that right now I'm so focused just on this one seat. And I definitely just see, I envision just so many good things that we could do, and when I say we, I mean my team. I have the most amazing campaign team who are so brilliant and just generous and, just good people, decent people. I personally, this is my goal right now. I mean, I really see myself making so many changes and doing things very differently. And, as I said, this is a very disruptive campaign. And I think that, we definitely are the underdogs, but I think that we're going to surprise a lot of people.
Question number 11 for the underdogs, the self-described underdogs. Name your favorite sports teams.
Ooh, okay, good one. Unfortunately, it's sad. The New York Knicks, the New York Mets. These are my teams that I grew up with. Not really big into football, so more baseball, basketball, and not really that much. I know this is Long Island. Everyone loves the Islanders. My brother is a huge, but I'm just not that into ice hockey.
That's perfectly fine. I'm just curious what everybody's answers to those questions are. Number 12, your favorite political movie or TV show and why it resonates with you.
Okay, so my favorite political movie is Dave. Do you remember that movie Dave with oh, what's that guy's name? The actor. He looks
Yeah, no, I
exactly
know
like the
exactly. Kevin
president.
Kline. Kevin Kline.
Who's
Yeah.
such a great actor. He is like an identical of the president.
Yeah.
And like he comes in and he's just like a genuine good person. Like in real life, he's like a small business owner and he like gets in and becomes the president and makes all these amazing changes. So, I mean, I like Dave.
He's an everyday person who found himself in that position and followed his heart.
And did a great job.
I'm not surprised that you've named that as an avatar, essentially for your campaign. My answer to that question is always The West Wing. I was a huge fan of that show, and something from The West Wing leads to my final question in this questionnaire. At one point, the president, played by Martin Sheen, President Bartlett, said, speaking my mind freely is more important to me than winning re-election. And that has stuck with me because we seem to be in an era where we're lacking political courage. It seems like a lot of members of Congress, their number one priority is just getting reelected. And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe that's why I asked the enriching yourself question earlier on. But I'm curious for you, what would you say is more important than your own electoral success or political future? What's more important for you than reelection?
For staying true to myself, the same exact thing.
Such as
staying true to myself, with how I feel. Like, for example, right now it's bail reform is a huge topic. And I get asked about it, I think, every day. And unfortunately, again, with the messaging, I think that, a lot of people don't understand like that, why we needed the bail reform that we people fought for. These are things that activists fought for that we finally put into place. Cash bail, and a lot of these things affect minority communities and poor people more than the wealthy, who has thousands of dollars sitting around at home to kind of. And I think a lot, to be safe, I could sit here and be like, oh yeah, blah blah, like it's a bad bail reform is bad, but I don't think it is. You know what I mean? People don't want to hear it, but that's okay with me. I think at the end of the day, I don't want to be a sellout. I'm not going to sit here and go around and tell people what they want to hear. I feel like we already have other candidates doing that. I just want to be myself and actually talk about what I think is important and what I think is right.
Reema Rasool, if voters who are listening to this episode of the podcast want to learn more about you, how can they find you online or in social media?
My website is reemaforcongress.com. All of my social media is attached, and there's a little on my website, there's a little contact us, and that actually goes directly into my email. So I love that. If there's anything you want to tell me, you like me, you don't like, whatever, you have a question, please just type it in there and I will reply. And I think that's the best thing, is just talking to people directly.
Once we've spoken with all 6 of the candidates running for Congress on the Democratic line in this podcast, we're hoping to arrange some one-on-one debates afterwards. I hope you'd be willing to participate in that, though scheduling may be difficult, I'm getting a sense, but I hope you'd be willing to participate in that.
Oh, absolutely, Andrew. I think this is really wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you. And with that brings us to the end. Reema Rasool, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Loved it. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. And that brings us just about to the close of this episode of 3 on NY3. My thanks to Reema Rasool and her campaign team. To learn more about her and her campaign, you can find her at reemaforcongress.com. That's REEMA. Her Twitter handle is at Reema Rasool. That's REEMA_RASOOL. My name is Andrew Whitman. I'm not going to spell it, but my last name's spelled like the poet. You can follow the show on Twitter. The show's handle is 3onNY3. Mine is at Whitman Andrew. Video versions of the podcast are available on YouTube. Audio streams can be found on all major podcast hosting apps. Just search for 3 on NY3. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever and however you're consuming it. And please tell a friend. That can only help. To contact the show, if you've got a question, a complaint, you want to sponsor the show, you've got a food delivery you want to have pop up on my doorstep, whatever, you can email the show at 3onny3@gmail.com. Quick reminder, primary day is June 28th. Election day is November 8th. This has been 3 on NY3 with Andrew Whitman. Bye-bye for now.